we have a signing. What a time to be alive. I'm excited. It's good. The vibes are strong. Because a man that we have been chasing for feels like my entire life has officially joined West Ham. Mateus Fernandes. It's happened. How do you feel?
Feel very good. As I'm sure people will notice, I'm not in the usual place. This is definitely an emergency sort of recording. It's all gone crazy just as I decided to take a couple of days um, away, which is typical. But yeah, Mateus Fernandes or Fernandes, very very good player. I was very impressed with what I saw, particularly in the second half of last season at Southampton. I'm not often motivated to speak about players at other clubs anymore really on Twitter. Tend not to tweet very much anymore anyway. And when we played them towards the end of last season, I was really impressed by the way that he played. I tweeted at that point that I'd be stunned if he remained with Southampton going into this season. And so not at all surprised that he's come back to the Premier League. Not at all surprised that it's taken quite a lot of money because of the quality of his performances last season. And yeah, I think from a West Ham perspective, really good player to add to our midfield.
I remember having conversations with you after the Southampton game specifically about him. Because it just was one of those things where you look at me and he seemed miles apart from the rest of the side.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'm slightly shocked it's us a little bit. I didn't think it would be, but we're here now. Let's talk about him. Let's get into the specifics. Let's get into the nitty gritty. For those who aren't aware of Fernandez, what does he do? What kind of player is he? Give us the sort of the basics.
Well, I mean, to start with, comes from a good level academy, right, at Sporting in Portugal. Went on loan initially in Portugal to Estoril, and then went to Southampton after that, and now with us. So 2 seasons of senior experience, really, at the top level. One in Portugal and one in the Premier League. In his first loan, he played generally as a number 8 in a 3-4-3, alongside Zanicello, who's another young midfield player who's been on several loans now from Santos, Brazilian club, and yeah, very much sort of the more offensive player, I would say, in that too. Zanicello popped up in some of our data searches earlier in the summer, right down at the bottom of, if you were going for really cheap options that could play as the number 6 for us as the deepest midfielder, then he would be one of the guys that sort of fits that role, and that kind of provides some sort of insight into what Mateus Fernandes was doing alongside him at Estoril. Popped up really highly there for tackles, for his overall defensive activity, but then also for progressing play. Some really impressive data actually in that season with Estoril, and you can understand why Southampton wanted to sign him off the back of that. Then to Southampton, where played pretty much every role they could have put him in. Played all across the midfield, played out wide. I think he played one game up front for them, so really showed his flexibility. And I think that's mostly because his level of quality across so many different areas was so much better than so many other players in that squad, that it was more about need and maybe less about what is best for Mateus Fernandes. It's like, what qualities of his at this point in this season do we need most? And that could be his dueling, that could be his tackling, that could be his carrying, that could be his progressive passing, that could be his penchant for getting into decent positions to score goals, that could be his creativity. There are so many things that you could be asking from him, and I think Southampton did kind of mix up what they were asking for from him last season, just to try and find ways to get points. But I mean, 2 relatively difficult seasons for him. Estoril finished, I can't remember exactly where they finished. I think it might have been 13th, but that season in Portugal was I think it's 4 or 5 teams that finished within 1 point of each other. I think it's like 31, 32 points. They're all around the same. Estoril actually finished top of that little pile, but that I think was only about 5 points clear of the relegation zone. So I think, good experience there, playing in difficult conditions, fighting to stay up. Then similar sorts of experience, but right down at the bottom in the Premier League last season, fighting to try and get points where possible in a team that's not functioning particularly well, but managing to stand out there. So he's done that twice in teams that have been struggling more generally in their leagues. And then you look at our position, start of this league season, don't look particularly strong going into this Premier League season, struggled in the first 2 games, struggled in the League Cup, didn't finish last season particularly well on points, has struggled to pick up points consistently in the way that we would like to across maybe the 2, maybe 3 previous league seasons. I mean, 2 league seasons, and then the second half of the league season before that, after from January onwards, really. And when you look at what he's done recently in that context from Leicester and Southampton, I think actually he comes in with a good level of understanding of how to make high impact in those kinds of scenarios, and fighting through difficult conditions and managing to perform well nonetheless. So I think that's another really, really good thing that we get from him.
Yeah, I think the thing that impresses me most when I was seeing him at Southampton was he, like you say, he was getting played in lots of different positions and in lots of different styles, mainly because, and it wasn't like sometimes you see a youth player come through and they play like quite a few different positions because they're trying to figure out sort of where their strong suit is, what's going to be their best thing. But with him, it did feel a lot like, okay, well, he can just do so many different things that whatever we need in that moment, he can do. And obviously, that's a little bit easier for a club to do when they're in a relegation battle, because there's just like a sort of like, right, we just need to put the best players in positions that we can make the most out of what we need them to do in that moment. But the fact he was doing that so young as well, this wasn't a case of, Paquetá's a good example for us, who's played on the left, he's played as a 10, he's played as an 8, he's played up front. Like, this guy's doing it really young, to the point where even when we got linked with him again over the last day or so, and I was like, wait, yeah, he is really just 21, like just turned 21 as well, which is such a huge positive, and such a huge like, just it's a big thing for him to have done that at that age at clubs where, like you say, have been through tough times. It's not just been someone who came out of the sporting academy and has been plain sailing and is now going to get thrown in at the Wolves. It's like, nah, he's been fighting these Wolves for several years, and he's shown that actually these Wolves can't get him. He's better than the Wolves. Not the club we face, though. That's done and dusted. We don't have to worry about that for like another 6
We
months.
are not better than the Wolves.
No. That one went a bit poorly for us. But what about the data specifically? What's the data saying around him? Does that back up sort of what we're saying about the eye test, which is, this guy's pretty good?
Yeah, I mean, there are loads of highlights in the data across so many different departments. You could start in different places, right? Like, it's whether you prioritize the way that you look at him as more of an attacking player, or whether you prioritize the way that you look at him as more of a player that can give you high levels of defensive activity, commit to lots of duels, make lots of tackles. I mean, he does both of those things at quite a high level. If we start with the more attacking side of the game, your big highlights are really what he does as a carrier, which is a quality that we've lacked in midfield, that we know we've been trying to address in this transfer window. So performs really, really highly for successful take-ons in the top 11% of Premier League midfielders, top 13% of Premier League midfielders for carries into the final thirds. So that activity in really good positions as well, driving the team into dangerous spots with his carrying. We know Mohamed Kudus was a really high impact carrier for West Ham, even if the end product was less reliable last season. But his carrying qualities were really vital to West Ham being dynamic in the way that they were able to arrive into the final third last season. We want to be dynamic in the way that we arrive into the final third this season, but I think there were big question marks over how that would look without Kudus and without a replacement, and with Guilherme now being injured and Somerville yet to come back from injury. It felt really difficult to try and find ways to be dynamic and variable in the ways in which we can arrive to the final third. I think it's some good routes to progress, express through pre-season. But I think as we come into the Premier League season, teams seem to already be wise to exactly what we want to do to progress. And, if you can be all over our dropping forward, whether that's Fulkrug or Paquetá, and I think it'd be a little bit more consistent with Paquetá, whilst the intensity is so high on that player from opposition defenders, then it's quite difficult for us to find ways to access the final third. Obviously, if you mix that up and you add carriers, then the pressure is maybe taken off the forward a little bit more because defenders are more worried about other threats, and then you maybe get more impact or success from your forwards. So yeah, really, really high quality in that area. And comparing him directly to Kudus, who we know is a very good carrier. He recorded 2.05 carries to the final third last season. Mateus Fernandes recorded 2.17, and Kudus is someone that's gone for north of 50 million quid, really on the back of his ability as a carrier to the final third. So yeah, really, really impressive data there. Defensively, I'd say the big highlight is just a number of tackles, interceptions, recoveries. Yeah, it's the overall activity that's really strong. It's not just that he did that at Southampton in a season where Southampton were really poor. He did that at Estoril as well. So there's that second season worth of data to support that. Ranked inside the top 26% of midfielders last season for tackles at 2.75 per 90. His ball recoveries landed in the top 31%. When you combine those two things and you add interceptions as well, the players that he ranks alongside are Ryan Gravenberch, Alexis McAllister, Pat Matassar, and Sandro Tonali. And his ranking among those is level with McAllister in second place. He's only 0.01 behind Gravenberch for combined activity defensively, which is really, really positive set of numbers. He's not just a progressive carrier. His progressive passing, better than Baliba, better than Boubacar Kamara, better than Kobbie Mainoo, which was a real surprise for me when I was looking at the data because of what we think of with Kobbie Mainoo. So really impressive talents there. In a very rare category of player, therefore, for being able to progress via pass and via carry and have not much bias in either direction. There are only 5 Premier League players who are able to kind of sit in that area where over 30% of their progressive actions come via carry. And that's Declan Rice, Ilkay Gundogan, Lucas Bergwijn, and Dominic Szoboszlai, and then Mateus Fernandes. So that, I think, is a really good illustration of his ability to be variable in the way that he progresses play. So really, really good player. That's without talking about his box crashing, his goal scoring, his creativity around the box. He's got 1.05 key passes per 90. He creates over 2 shots per game for teammates. So yeah, like really, really exciting player.
And it's not like some of those stats there, as you're reading them out, are just like so impressive to me. But it's not like sometimes when you're a club who get relegated or are fighting around the relegation zone and you'll see stats like I always remember Jussi Askelainen had the most saves in the Premier League, for example. And
Yeah,
it's
sure.
like, that's because you're receiving so many shots that it's bound to sort of inflate those numbers a bit. Or if you're a team who play like a David Moyes side, for example, and Craig Dawson maybe just blows out of statistically because like the ball's getting crossed in and he's just saying no every single time, or Angelo Ogbonna or whoever it might be in that moment, Kurt Zouma, right? This is a guy who was playing for a team who were down the bottom, who ended up getting relegated, but he's putting up carries and passes and key passes and those kind of things that are like, that shows that in a team that's struggling, he's still doing all of the things. And it really is all of the things, like what you're saying there. He's good in the defensive side of it, so with tackles and interceptions. He's good at the carrying side of it. He's good at the passing side of it. And that's just really impressive for someone who, again, was in a team that got relegated. This isn't like some of the names you were listing off there are playing for teams who are fighting for the title. And he's putting up numbers similar to them, which is incredibly impressive. And that carries more than Kudus is just wild.
I know, I was kind of shocked when I went through and saw that.
Like you say, this is the guy who is our carrier, who was our carrier for like 2 seasons, and he's putting up bigger numbers than he did last season, which is wild. So then, where do you think he fits? Because he can do so many different things. Where would we be expecting him to sort of fit into the systems that we've seen so far?
Yeah, I mean, his flexibility is great, right? Because I think if you wanted to play a box midfield, I think it's quite clear that we are going to be playing, I know there's a lot of complaints about it, but that we're probably going to be playing a 3-back system this season, and we're going to try and find ways to make that work for us. I think as players come back to fitness, as we get players through the door, and I don't think Fernandes is going to be the only one today, our flexibility to do different things and act in different ways and defend in different ways as a team improves, and therefore theoretically the quality of the system also improves, or the quality of the output from the team improves. So yeah, if he wanted to play a 3-box-3, I think he could play as one of the 10s in that, but I think he could do a very, very good job and probably have him as one of the deeper two midfielders. I think his combination of qualities means that he's quite well suited to that sort of role. Our primary system seems to be more this sort of 3-diamond-3, or 3-5-2, 5-3-2. Numbers don't really matter. The important thing is one of the forwards drops more towards the midfield and one of the forwards goes beyond, and then you have 3 midfielders. One which is mine, mainly given the task of sitting in front of the centre backs and screening the centre backs and helping us build up, and 2 which are given tasks that are more about pushing into the channels. One of those is more used to drop deeper at times and help in build up, while the other one is used more to advance more towards the front line, and particularly when we play off the 9 that drops, to receive passes there and try and drive, once a centre back has stepped forward, try and use that ability on the carry. And that's kind of, brings me to where I see him, because of his ability as a carrier. I think playing as maybe the left-sided of the 3, the left central midfielder, the one that gets closer to the front line, the one that actually steps up in the press as well and has to cover a lot of ground, because we see what his athletic ability is clearly in the data that he's recording for defensive activity. Those shuttle runs have been really difficult for Tomáš Souček, who's a very, very good player for us in terms of impacting the boxes, but defending large spaces rather than smaller spaces is a bigger challenge for Souček, whereas Fernandes, I think, would be perfectly comfortable making those big jumps from the midfield to the front line when we play against teams that build in a 3, or when we play against any team that maybe builds usually in a 4 but moves to a 3 situationally to find solutions against us, to get that width on the first line to stop us from being quite so easy to play inside the block and force teams around the outside of the block. I think his athleticism there would be very useful to us. So that's probably where I see him in our primary system. I've just described where I see him probably in a secondary system. If he were to change and go to any other kind of system, I think his flexibility is incredible, right? So he could play as a 10 in a 4-2-3-1. He could play as one of a 3 in a 4-3-3. He could play out wide for you if you desperately needed him to, in like a 4-4-2 defensively. I think he could do most of the jobs. And then I think there is that, obviously, we want things to work out with Graham Potter. We want the system that we're building towards to work out. But if you did end up changing in a year's time or in 6 months' time or however long, it doesn't matter. I don't think this is a player that you lose out on down the line, if you get what I mean. I don't think you're recruiting someone that only works in the current context. I think going forward beyond that, his flexibility and his quality means that really I think he does quite a useful job, quite a good job under lots of different managers in lots of different styles and lots of different approaches.
Yeah, and that's the sort of big thing for me when it comes down to just general thoughts to like conclude this, is when I see him as someone who can do so many different things and has done so many different things. Not even like I look at the data and I look at how he plays and maybe he could also do this. No, he has done so many different things. The proof is in the pudding that we have had a inability to tinker as much. Like Chelsea game is a prime example of, you see a side who obviously have all of the money in the world, and seemingly every player at some point will have to do at least 6 months at Chelsea at the moment. At least that's how it feels like at the moment in the transfer market. And they are able to, during the course of a game, just continuously switch it up. Okay, this isn't working. All right, we're going to bring on this guy, and then we're going to switch the way we're doing something up. Oh, okay, this isn't working. Okay, we're going to go to this kind of system. And that kind of tinkering and those kind of options is something we just haven't really had the ability to do. This season, last season, it's just not really been possible. And so with him, that gives you the ability to switch things up sometimes. Not only just from a starting 11 standpoint, but hey, maybe halfway through a match, it's going in a specific way and you think, actually, we could move Fernandez over here. Maybe Paquetá starts up front. Maybe we then bring him back down into midfield and we do something else. Do you know what I mean? You get loads of these different options that you can actually change. And it means that we don't have to be so wedded to something, because we have someone of his quality who can do so many different things and has shown that ability in the past. And that's the thing that I think most excited for apart from the fact that we've gone and signed someone who is very, very good and is only 21, which is always just a big vibe in general. Your closing thoughts before we end this thing?
A plus, great player, fits the current system. Young player with lots of room to develop. I think just a really nice piece of recruitment, and on the most basic level, if you were thinking about how you cope with what we're currently experiencing and what we have been experiencing, the main thing you look at probably is a lack of dynamism with and without the ball, a lack of speed with and without the ball. This is a player that gives you a bit of dynamism with and without the ball, that records loads of defensive activity, that carries really well, right? So just on that basic level, it ticks boxes that aren't currently ticked in the squad, and therefore that's a good idea.
Yeah. So thank you very much for watching. Subscribe if you haven't already. Like the video, because hey, maybe West Ham sign another player today. Who knows? It's kind of what feels like might be happening. So there might be a different one of these very, very soon. So subscribe so you don't miss out on it. And we will see you next time. Cheers, everyone. Bye.